Okay, so here we have the path for Wizdomiot. Now, Wizdomiot's a pretty short song. I think it's like 2.5 minutes. So there aren't too many acts, but I think I'm right in saying that it has the same number of activations as Waves, which is like double the length, and we just went over that. But 4 activations is probably what you'd expect for a song with this many notes, and that is of this length. So we will get into it. So first activation is maybe not exactly what you'd expect. So we have our 2 phrases. There's no whammy at all, so there's no worrying about whammy. And then we have a long string of 16ths here, basically. And you might think, okay, so why? So this is all 16ths for 4 measures, and we got 2 star power phrases. So surely if we act on this note, we'll just get... that can't not be optimal. It doesn't get any faster than 16th notes. Well, sort of. Now, we don't activate here because we miss out on a potential 200 if we squeeze one of these notes. So there's a break at the start of this 5th measure. There's a missing note here. If we activate here, there's no point at which there's a break again. So you can actually squeeze in an extra note either side. Well, it ends up being 1 note if you squeeze both of these notes. So we end up with a potential 200. And it's not a harder activation, so there really is no reason not to wait until we get here after the break and then activate. I think 99% of the time, probably not against Nick, but like any other time, I was probably ahead if the player activated here and I activated here. Just took 100 points right off the bat, just like that. So that's the first act, not what you'd expect, but an easy activation at least. Okay, so now we have our first whammy phrase. There's a double open here, which makes whammy in this note a little tricky, but not that tricky. But it's worth pointing out at least. Second activation, the only difficulty with this one is remembering exactly where it is. So we have this part where it goes quiet, doom, 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 or whatever. So I would wait until what is essentially the second cycle of it, which starts right here. This is like the build-up bar, or measure. So it starts here, and then we're waiting for the point where it goes do 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 do. So that way do 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 is where we want to activate on this note right here. So I was just waiting for the point where we saw this yellow blue chord. There's 2 before it, but if we just remember that it's like over halfway through the cycle, then we'll always activate here. There's no squeeze. There is a bit of whammy, so there is a chance I wouldn't get this note, I guess. But yeah, so that's the second activation. Just remembering where it is. More of an audio cue and visual cue for me for that one. Third activation, simple phrase, and then we have our measure long whammy. So we want to whammy that as much as possible because this next activation I think might be the most valuable. It's either this one or the last one. Whamming as much as possible. And obviously we're activating over the fast part and we're getting the whole thing in along with a little extra. So I didn't activate right here because obviously I'm not going to get full early whammy. I instead activated on this orange, which is kind of easy to remember because it's a descending quint. It's on a bar. So yeah, that's an easy visual cue. So we're activating there. The only thing with activating here, either here or here really, is I tap this bit with the double greens elbow strummed, but I tap the top note. So transitioning from here to here in 200 BPM bars is kind of quick, but I never ended up screwing that up really. But that is and obviously the notes themselves are missable. So this one is definitely the deal breaker of this song. This one activation, and of course if you activate earlier on, you're missing out on a lot more points. Like I don't know exactly what the deficit's going to be, but it's just makes so much more sense to activate right here. And of course that little bit, this whammy right here, enables us to activate almost at the start of bar 116, measure 116. So yeah, ideally we end right here, and then we are almost immediately into our next phrase, which is a whammy phrase. So basically, as soon as this is over, we have a 1 measure break, and then we really want to be whammying straight away, just remembering the other phrases immediately after, because we do want to get a lot of whammy in this phrase, because there's no whammy here. And as I say, this next activation is also pretty valuable. Some chords in it, a quick bit here. So yeah, and well, luckily for us, remembering where the activation isn't a problem, because it's immediate and it's, you know, a relatively decent gap from this note to this note. So yeah, immediate activation, just get as much as possible in. So, and there's no tapping immediately after the activation, so that's no problem. Our final act is simple. And yeah, that's Wizdomiot's path. Not that trivial, to be honest with you. It's a short song, and the notes are probably more interesting, but I would say the path is at least, you know, a little bit different than what most people would expect, especially that first activation. But yeah, well, speaking of the notes, we will get onto it right now. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes of Wizdomiot, and there is a few things to say about this one. Quite a few bits where I did things to stay consistent, a few methods developed, even from pretty much the very first section. Actually, the second section, I tell a lie. But here we are, the second section of the song. I'll just play it one-handed now to show you what it is. Now, so orange walls going into a blue wall. Pretty awkward to do one-handed, for me at least. See, that's trying to do it in third position and slide down. Doesn't really work. So, and considering this is all taps, there is an obvious solution, and that is just to just tap it. Why wouldn't you tap that? And I don't even necessarily stay in first position for it all, actually. So you literally have infinite time to get ready to tap these notes. Well, from the song begins, really. And then the transition out, it's not really a transition, but it ends with this extended sustain, red yellow. So if you're in first position, after you tap the last blue, you literally just do that. Works either if you go up to second position or just stay in first position the entire time. Perfectly fine. So that's just something to make it 100% consistent. That's what it's all about. But anyway, after that, drop one. I don't really have anything to say, it's just 16ths. And it's all one-handing. Now there is a double yellow there, which obviously you just strum, and it's a non-issue. So that's that bit. There isn't anything to say, really. It's just one-handing and sliding, just like everything else. Not surprising enough, I have stuff to say about this section, or I guess break B, not break A. First of all, remembering that there's a random strum note there in the midst of those taps. There's a number of times I've forgotten that that was there, so I just needed to focus there and remember, hey, there's a strum bit here. So yeah. So you hear that? I'm just strumming every, I think half bar or bar, either or. It's quite a fast tempo, so it can be. Every bar. That way these awkward parts where it goes this chord followed by a yellow followed by a red yellow are no longer awkward, and you don't have to do a random strum in it because you're already doing a strum every bar, so it just falls naturally. And the only time you don't strum every bar right there, you don't really need to. And then this grace note, probably shouldn't do that because the yellow doesn't fall on the measure. So it changes it from like a mini, like where the hell do I strum, to just keep in rhythm basically, and you just only need to worry about where the notes are, and you don't need to worry about exactly where the strum is, because obviously when it's all taps, it's up to you, to your own personal preference. You could do that not strumming at all easily, but for me it threw me off a little bit at least with that red blue to red yellow chord bit. So yeah, just another little thing. And then we have this drop 2. Starts off just these sweeps, which you're just gonna, at least are one-handed. Right, I'm going to set their position right here, because if you remember from the pass part, this is where the activation is. So after this note, I would start tapping. Now I'm just gonna, I'll let it play. It's awkward, and first of all, those quint zigs with the strums are strange. Like, there isn't really any pattern like that anywhere else in the pools, or it rarely happens just anywhere in any song, to be honest. And then you have these triplets that are not linear. They're not literally just green anchor, red anchor, yellow anchor. That's just sort of all over the place. They go from ascending to descending, which makes alt tapping more difficult. So that was just out of the question for me. But we'll start off with these zigs. So obviously you could one-hand them, but I obviously opted to well, I forgot about the last one. As I said before, yeah, I elbow strum the greens and just tap the orange. As to where I start anchoring, it's normally the blue, I think. I just anchor the blue and hit the orange on top. Or maybe it's the yellow. It's either the yellow or the blue. And then it's a case of just timing your strum, really, after that. Tapping that. So that's the first part of it. Okay, then we have the triplets. And now, with these, at least in the matches I played, I standard tapped them, which I think resulted in a 50-50. I FC'd it once and I missed the second time. So standard tapping this, I'm just going to set the position right here, is really awkward. Like, it's not actually very consistent. I'd like to hit it at least once though. You see what I mean? It's sort of awkward. At least when it gets to the descending bit, so actually I'll slow it down so I'm not confusing myself. So this is what I would do. Even 50% speed is weird. And a strange thing happens, but like the ascendings are fine if you just pay attention to where they are. But when it gets to the descendings and the zig at the top, it starts becoming less triplets and more like, you know how GHP did Fast Solo A, where you literally just alternated between the blue and the yellow as standard tapping. It becomes a little bit like that, and forget that it's triplets. And it doesn't have to be that way on 50, but on a full speed it definitely gets like that. And otherwise, it's a lot of anchor shifting, like without even thinking, to be honest, and position shifting. That red note is probably the hardest single note in it that I just missed, because it's quite a fast anchor swap. Okay, I'll build it up. That's how I hit it. Now I'm getting it back now. And then an elbow strum out. Okay, so that's as much as I can possibly explain that, because it is convoluted. And now I'll do it. I'm not going to try and do the full section because I'll end up probably embarrassing myself, but I'll do it at least with the zigs.
So it also helps to pay attention to where the highest notes are. So there you go. Paying attention to where the highest notes are can definitely help you with that. Now, alternatively, I never did this in a match because I never played it after the second match, but I realised, like, this isn't actually very consistent. And we're playing a tournament where no one can see how I'm playing these notes anyway. So yes, the alternate is moosing, which makes it, just turns into RNG basically. Now there was a specific point at which I started to moose, so I didn't, you can see I standard tapped the first few triplets, and where I would start moosing is after this last red, blue, orange, and then we start doing quad zigs until the oranges go, then we swap down to the first position. So yeah, and this is probably more consistent if you remember when to start. You see, transitioning from a standard tap to moosing is also kind of strange. You see, because my finger wants to stay here rather than hit this blue note. And now if you think too much about it, you'll miss your cue. But you can see I started spamming late and it still hits. But as I say, it's not 100% consistent. And that is sort of the theme of this one part. It is what maybe probably my least consistent part out of Pool 2, outside of maybe the ladders and dads. So yeah, this thing I can't say I'm overly consistent at, but at least there was a couple of things I could do to try to be consistent. I wasn't just flailing through the whole thing and hoping. And as I say, I didn't actually moose in any of the matches, but yeah, it is a viable method, and as I say, this is for consistency's sake, not for, and I said this before, hey look at me, I play Rock Band 3 style playing. But anyway, that is that section. And believe it or not, we're still not done. In fact, the bridge contains the next part I want to speak about. And in fact, it's not. This is going to take like 1 second as soon as we get up to it. It just happens to be in this section. So actually, I'm just going to set the position. I'm going to go from here from now. 5 strums. It's 5 strums. It'll never overstrum if you do 5 strums. Even if it eats one of the notes, it'll still work. See? Because it's Clone Hero. Right, and what I did there is not what I did for this part after. Right, so let me break that down a little bit. Yeah, and that looked like a stumble, but that is what I do here. So what we're doing, we're just tapping the chords while we're anchoring. So 1, 2, bip, bip, bump, bump. So yeah, bump, 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 bump with the anchor switch. One hand for a little bit. When it gets to the orange note, a double tap. And that second one is more awkward because of that. And I do tap this red note, if I didn't say already. You might even notice that I'm actually hitting the orange with my left hand anyway, but it just happens that way. I still do the double tap, because it's how I got consistent in the first place. But if I don't press the orange, the method works exactly the same way. And with that one, it's literally just first position. At least with the second one, there's no anchor swap. In fact, even with the first one, I don't necessarily do an anchor swap. So now we'll speed it up. And the rest of it is kind of awkward. There's these random tap strums, I guess you would call them. You just need to know that they're there. You see a couple of extra strums there when it turns into blue-orange chords. Every blue-orange chord there after the main first tapping bit, strummed. The orange notes after, strummed. Just like that. And the strum after the chord is because I'm still anchoring blue, and it won't overstrum that way. And that's how to get consistent with that part at least. And this has been the longest explanation in notes so far, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, there is a lot to say in this like 2-minute song. So many things going on. But yeah, that's that. Now I'll stop talking and start playing. Okay, so that was Wizdomiot, got 287, 386. Pretty much every time your score is going to end in a 6 if you hold all the sustains. I think about 288k flat is the best I ever got. I don't know if I got that in the tournament. This is average, yeah, good score, fine score, nothing really wrong with it. So yeah, we'll move on to the daddy now, which is Gazelle. Although it's not literally the daddy, but you know what I mean.